Hi, I'm Tim Tyler, and this is a video about automation, and it focuses on the possibility of independently automating the functions of the human body and the human mind. Often, automation involves complete replacement of an individual human with some kind of machine equivalent. So, for example, an ATM replaces a human bank teller, or an automated checkout replaces a human checkout assistant. However, automation need not necessarily replace entire human beings with machine equivalents. Sometimes only part of the function of a human is what needs replicating. So, for example, a factory worker might sit at their terminal and observe instructions coming on the video screen in front of them, and then press buttons on their keyboard, thereby activating robots further down the production line. What you see happening there is machinery post-processing information from the world, presenting it to the human through their conventional senses, so their sensory inputs are being pre-processed by a machine, and then their motor outputs, what they type up with their fingers, is then post-processed by another machine before it's translated into action in the real world. So this form of pre-processing, post-processing, allows the functions of an individual human to be overtaken by those of machines, kind of a sensory channel at a time. So it's not necessary to replace a whole human being at once, rather just one sensory channel at a time, or one bunch of motor outputs at a time can be replaced. And that makes the process of automation easier to do. You can keep the human brain in the loop for as long as it's needed, and then replace that at the last minute if necessary. There's been quite a lot of speculation that in the future our senses will become increasingly pre-processed by machinery, and our motor outputs will be increasingly post-processed, and what will happen is effectively that our whole sensory motor system will be taken over by machinery, and that will be deposited into an immersive virtual reality basically. And there's been a number of fictional works that explore this idea that the body is going to be replaced on a relatively whole-scale basis, leaving the mind intact. So, for example, that's a relatively common theme in movies such as The Matrix or Existenz, The 13th Floor, Avalon, Total Recall, Strange Days, and most recently Surrogates. So the idea of replacing the human body has some attractions. The body's got some problems. It's weak, it's easily damaged, it's prone to illness and pathogens, and it starts out barely able to move or talk or do anything useful, and often ends its life in much the same way. So to illustrate that point, here's Marshall Brain describing some of the problems with the human body in an interview.
The second problem with our bodies is that they're just so terrible as vehicles. You know, like, I mean, they aren't bad, but if you don't feed your body, it dies. If it gets injured, you can't do things. I mean, we've got to use the restroom every 2 hours, and we sweat, and I mean, these aren't the greatest vehicles ever designed to hold a consciousness.
Marshall has a point that the human body has some serious disadvantages to it. Also, there seems to be a trend in society for people to spend less time interacting with the world using their real physical bodies, and more time interacting with it using computer systems to pre-process their sensory inputs and post-process their motor outputs. Movies have projected this trend into the future, and we see things like The Matrix and Surrogates, and I'm going to show you a clip of Surrogates next of all to give you some indication of what some people imagine that the future will be like.
Human surrogates combine the durability of a machine with the grace and beauty of the human body. With most people living their lives through their surrogate selves, our world has become a safer place. Take a seat in your STEM chair, and just with the power of your mind, you can control your surrogate and send it out into the real world. You can finally live the life you've always dreamt of.
Okay, so now we come to the point of the video. There's another automation strategy that I haven't discussed so far, and rather than replacing the entire human body and mind, or just replacing parts of its sensory organs, or indeed its whole body, another strategy involves replacing the human mind itself. The human mind, like the human body, has many problems. It's forgetful, unreliable, slow, indeterministic, and it can't be backed up. Looking at the underlying engineering involved, the mind has poor serial capabilities. It's like an engineer had been instructed to build a telephone network in a city and was forced to connect each household to every other household that it wanted to speak to. The emotional system in the mind is hacked in using chemical neurotransmitters, so the brain floats in a soup of emotions, and the whole thing is an engineering disaster, basically. Next, I'm going to throw some light on the issue by considering some existing devices. Here's a couple of electronic devices. These things are now just animals in some respects, in that they've got sensory inputs, motor outputs, a central processing unit, and that they take in a source of low entropy and then spit out a source of high entropy. We look at the capabilities of this thing. It's got a reasonably good camera on it. Screen's quite good high resolution screen. However, the CPU in it is pretty underpowered, and also if you compare this to a kind of equivalent animal such as a rat or something like that, this one has very poor regenerative capabilities. If you dropped a rat and this device on the floor, then the rat would survive, and this would survive by nature of its hard outer shell, but completely different kind of strategy from the rat, and poor regenerative capability, so it has to be very hard and shock resistant. And then lastly, a rat would be squirming around and trying to escape, and this device just sits there doing nothing. It's got moving parts, so it's got all kinds of things that can move relative to each other, but hardly any motor action at all, really, compared to an animal of similar kind of size and shape. So some differences there between our existing technology and biological technology. If you think about what's going to happen in the future, then it seems quite likely that we'll have kind of at least the hardware for machine intelligence before we get advanced nanotechnology, simply because it's incredibly easy to build the hardware for a brain. You just need a whole bunch of NAND gates, basically, and a power supply and a heat sink, whereas in order to build a system with moving parts and proper actuators, you need much more sophisticated technology and a whole bunch of different types of components rather than just one basic kind of NAND gate. So computation universality means that we'll get the hardware for machine intelligence long before we've got sophisticated nanotechnology, basically. There's the possibility that the software might be a problem, and that might mean that we get machine intelligence later, but the software doesn't seem like that big a problem to me. I know it's been an open problem for a number of years now to try and make intelligent machines, but it doesn't look as though the intelligence of machines lags all that dramatically behind the hardware that it's running on. So existing computers, despite the fact that they've got pea-sized brains, still do quite a good job of speech recognition. So I don't think that we'll have serious software development problems, and the kind of conclusion of this is that there's a replacement of the human mind going on at the moment. If you look out into the world, you'll see vast corporations that consist of many machines and many humans all acting together in concert, and they're vastly smarter than most individual humans are. And what you can see is happening is that the individual minds of the humans are no longer kind of the main thing that's in control of their actions. Instead, the humans are receiving instructions from signals coming to them across the internet, and for example they're working on behalf of these other large companies. So effectively you've got huge very intelligent mind sitting out on the internet, and then the swarms of human bodies all around it that are acting in its service. So for example, Facebook is a classic example of this. We've got a big very smart, very knowledgeable server system sitting out on the internet, and then out in the world there's thousands of humans all using their cameras and performing tasks to create links between themselves and other humans who are then attracted to Facebook, and the result of it is that there's a very large kind of intelligent agent sitting out on the internet, and then lots of humans who their own mental processes are not very significant, but they're nonetheless having all their motor skills taken advantage of by this intelligent agent that's basically using them as a whole bunch of little workers that perform its actions in the world. So you can imagine a scenario where the human brains are basically kind of made redundant by a large mind on the internet that just basically gives instructions to large numbers of human beings, and they perform the actions in the world, and they'll actually act as the motor actuators for the intelligent agent on the internet, and the intelligent agent may well want to take advantage of them because machine actuators aren't yet as advanced as human bodies are, and the human mind acts as a better robot controller than we currently have robot controllers for. So an internet mind may as well take advantage of all the humans around in the vicinity. They all seem quite eager to perform the bidding of agents on the internet, so that seems fine. And this scenario is kind of quite opposite to the scenario portrayed in The Matrix and Surrogates and Total Recall and so on, where the human body is what's replaced by machines and the human mind persists. In the kind of other scenario that I'm talking about, which doesn't seem to be talked up very much and is not promoted in science fiction very much, it's the human mind that's basically been replaced by a large mind on the internet, and the human body just exists to do the bidding of the large mind on the internet. So that's my perspective on the whole issue. Enjoy.